Hello, my name is Brian Lewis, and I'm an instructor at J10S. Today we're going to talk some about stormwater and flash floods, have an overview of some of the hazards and issues we need to pay attention to. However, before we get started on the presentation, I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about near misses and accidents that may have occurred since either we last spoke or your J10S instructor last spoke to you. Simply pause the video, talk about any near misses and accidents. When you're finished, go ahead and press play again, and we'll continue with the presentation on stormwater and flash floods. So, when we talk about stormwater, we have a whole lot of hazards, both public safety as well as worker safety, that we need to talk about. It affects our families, it affects our friends, it affects our co-workers, both the stormwater and the flash flood. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to ask some questions, not necessarily questions you have to answer directly to a JTNS instructor, but just to bring up issues we all need to think about and consider when we do some pre-planning. And how we keep our communities clean. So, the first question, what is stormwater? Well, it is simply polluted runoff. Typically, it comes from rain or snow. May not always be rain or snow, but typically it comes from rain or snow. Typically, it's an issue we have to address in urban and developed areas, areas that have a great deal of concrete and or pavement, blacktop. Typically in rural areas, what happens is when it rains or you have snow melt, it goes through the grass and through the ground, and the water is filtered before it makes it to any waterway. So that's something to keep in mind. What happens with stormwater in urban and developed areas is instead of being absorbed through the grass and into the ground, the water flows over the pavement. It flows over parking lots. It flows over concrete. It flows over all kinds of structures. And as it flows over these structures, this pavement, this concrete, parking lots, whatever, it picks up a lot of stuff. It takes that stuff to our storm drains. Eventually, it ends up at sewage plants or in our waterways. And it can be an issue for both workers as well as public safety. So what does it pick up? Well, stormwater will pick up solids, any kind of solid, any kind of trash, all kinds of oils, all kinds of industrial chemicals. Just think about the oils and chemicals that are in our vehicles. And those are things that eventually have slow leaks. Think about the industrial chemicals we use to wash the sidings on our house, places of business, our vehicles, any kind of oils that we need to put some kind of aggregate on to soak up and then dispose of. Any of those things can be transported to our waterways. So we need to be aware of that. We need to try and abate that as much as possible. So if we don't, what are some of the consequences if we don't be good stewards at work and at home? Well, this water cannot soak into the ground. So where does it go? It goes to the storm drains and it runs into rivers, it runs into streams. There is potential in a lot of localities, a lot of areas, for it to overflow sewage plants, overflow sewage plants, wastewater treatment plants, all kinds of things, especially as we talk later about natural disasters. Becomes obvious. I'm sure you think of it anyway. So, stormwater, some of the potential hazards. It's a hazard to drinking water. If this material flows to where we have people swimming, people enjoying fishing, you've got pathogens. You've got all kinds of diseases that can enter our waterways where we enjoy ourselves. Excess nutrients can cause algae to bloom, We've got heavy metals and toxins from industrial chemicals. Heavy metals are very difficult to remove from the environment. They're very difficult to remove from your body once they're there. That's why we recognize those hazards, and we want to keep our public as well as our workers safe from these things. What can we do? Well, what can we do is housekeeping. We can pick up, we can sweep up, we can clean up, we can take personal responsibility while we're at work as well in our personal lives when we're at home. If you spill oil, use something to absorb it and dispose of it properly. Wash your vehicles in areas that you're supposed to wash your vehicles at work. Make sure that whatever chemicals you wash off do not make it back into the groundwater, into the storm drains. Make sure we do our part to keep our community safe. That's what we're talking about. We're going to talk about flash floods now, and flash floods absolutely can contribute to stormwater, so keep that in mind. They present particular hazards, not just to workers, but to the public at large also. We'll talk a lot about those. The flash floods can be caused by natural events, natural disasters. They can be caused from all sorts of things. We'll talk a little bit about what causes or what the definition is of a flash flood, some of the common hazards we'll have to address, and how to prepare for flash floods. So, what is a flash flood? What is the definition? What is a typical flash flood? Well, it is by definition, a local flood, not a widespread flood. And generally, it is a flood that occurs 6 hours after the cause. Whether that causes a natural event, tremendous amount of water distributed locally, either through rain, snow, whatever, or by some other event at a dam or levee. We'll talk more about that. But typically, it is a flood that occurs 6 hours after whatever caused the water to appear in that local community. So, as I said before, it could be heavy rain. It could be a tremendous amount of snow and ice melting. Unfortunately, it could be a failure of a dam. It could be debris that jams up the locks or the spillways of a dam. It could be a levee failure. If you remember a few years back in New Orleans when the levees failed, now it was a tremendous flood, tremendous hurricane, natural event. Tornadoes can absolutely do a massive amount of destruction. Usually not only does heavy rain accompany tornadoes, but the tornadoes themselves can destroy a lot of our public utilities and buildings. So what are the primary effects of the flash floods? Well, obviously, faster moving water. It's a potential to be drowned, potential to be swept away. Something we don't always think about, but you can notice anytime you see localized flash flooding, is structures and bridges being undermined. It doesn't have to be a house or an industrial building. Bridges, railroad trestles, all kinds of things can be undermined, make them unsafe to travel across, or make an impact hazard downstream when all that material is moving towards something or someone else. Flash floods absolutely can cause a high concentration of garbage, a high concentration of debris, a high concentration of pollutants. We have to keep in mind that all this fast-moving water, much like the stormwater we talked about, it's going to gather all that material, whatever it may be, and it's going to take it and it's going to dump it into an area. As public works employees, you're going to be required to work. You're going to have the public safety to keep in mind. All these things are going to come into play when we have a flash flood. Besides all of the destruction that you typically see because it's sensational on television, it can destroy crops. destroy food sources, leave people homeless, destroy housing. People may not have a place to stay. Businesses may not have a place to work. People will be in shock when this occurs. Workers are going to have a heavy load, and there's going to be a temptation to take some shortcuts to avoid hazards. It's not a good situation, and it's not something you should give into when we talk about personal protective equipment and protecting yourself. Flash floods can cause a disruption of the water supply. Every community, their sewage plant, their wastewater plant, their water plants, they're all rated for a certain capacity. Different localities are close to that capacity, some are not. It can disrupt the supply of natural gas. If it occurs in the winter or the late fall, this can be a real issue. Electrical power can be disrupted. Local transportation, not just public transportation, people in their own cars, but there again, as a utility or public works employee, you're going to need to get to where the problems are. This can be a problem, can absolutely be a problem. Tornadoes and flooding. Well, what are the effects of some of these natural disasters? What's the restoration time frame? What are we talking about? The public's going to want to know. You're going to need to know. How prepared are you, or how prepared are your utilities? Is your utility to deal with this? Is there a plan in place? Do you have the appropriate amount of material when traffic is disrupted? Is there enough PPE? Is there enough raw material to take care of what you need to do? Are people trained and have access to the places they need to go? All things has to be considered when you plan for these. Here's an example of an Amazon warehouse in Illinois. At least 70 people were feared to be dead in Kentucky after tornadoes and severe weather tore through multiple states and caused widespread devastation. I'm sure you've seen pictures like this one and others we're going to look at soon. The debris is massive. The cleanup is massive. The use of chainsaws, the need for PPE, chaps, gloves, safety glasses, hard hats, safety shoes. The amount of work is tremendous. You're going to have to worry about rest. You're going to have to worry about people being refreshed to do a job safely. Here's another example of an EF5 tornado in December of 2021. There again, houses, buildings, structures, it becomes all trash, rubble, debris, whatever you want to call it. It's a massive cleanup. And utility, public works, facility and maintenance people, they're going to be so busy, have a lot of hazards they have to consider. You're going to have the public wanting to pitch in, and that's a great thing, but they don't always understand or know the hazards. You're going to have to educate people on what they need to do to keep themselves safe. Mayfield, Kentucky wastewater treatment plant. Here's a picture that partially shows a destroyed building by a tornado. There again, wastewater treatment plant. What are you going to do when the capacities of your wastewater, water, sewage plant, when the capacities are exceeded? You're going to have some idea of when people can have fresh water. Where are you going to get fresh water? What are your plans? Now, I know that FEMA and other organizations, state organizations, help out. You still have to have a plan. You still have to coordinate. Still have to think about the hazards workers are going to endure, or not necessarily endure, but how to abate those hazards so people do not get hurt. Summary: always be ready for the unexpected. Have a plan in place. Have a plan in place. Have people go through training, know what they need to do, plan for the worst, and hope for the best. I know it is a cliche. The reason it's a cliche is because it works, and it's important. It's important to absolutely have a plan and consider it a success over your lifetime, your working lifetime, if you never have to put that plan in place. Much better be prepared and never use it, right? For additional information and to provide feedback and comments, contact Tennessee JTNS instructor or visit the Tennessee Job Training and Safety Program website at www.tnjts.com. For me and everyone at JTNS, thank you for listening. Absolutely want you to be safe. Don't expose yourself to any hazards. Remember, pre-planning when we talk about stormwater, protecting our public waterways as well as being safe. Thank you. Have a great day.